My name is Michal Friedlander, and I'm the Curator of Judaica and Applied Arts at the Jewish Museum. Women in general in the 1920s were sidelined into the decorative arts. They weren't accepted in the fine arts departments. But of course there were tremendously talented women among these women, and they did wonderful things there. And what I decided to try and do is to try and find the traces of the Jewish women and what happened to them. And gradually we're building up a collection and finding some of these women and finding their stories. And it's not necessarily about the highest quality artwork. It's about the historical value of the pieces and the story that they tell. So from all the ceramicists that we're presenting, the person who's the most well known is this woman. And this is Margaretha Hyman Löwenstein Marx. She married twice, and it makes it very difficult for us in the exhibition because her name is so long. It takes up half the wall. And this is from the period when she studied at the Bauhaus. And she was a tremendously gifted designer. And at a very young age, she was running her own workshop. And here we have examples from the time that she worked in Germany, which are the pieces for which she's known. These very, very avant-garde pieces. Look at this the wonderful lines of this teapot. And then here we see this very reduced patterning with the dots and the lines. And this exceptional clock. But then in the 1930s, she was denounced locally by the Nazi Party. And she sold her company to an officer from the Nazi Party, Heinrich Schild. And Heinrich Schild put another person as the artistic director of the company, and that was Hedwig Bollhagen. What did happen, we can see here, there's a tiny little snippet out of the newspaper. This is from Der Angriff. And this was published in 1935, and it says here in German underneath, Zwei Rassen fanden für denselben Zweck verschiedene Formen. Welche ist schöner? And on this side, we have these wonderful avant-garde pieces from Hyman Löwenstein, and on the right we have the pieces from Hedwig Bollhagen. And here we see the teapot. This is the actual teapot that was used in this photograph, and we have it from the family who eventually did get it back from Bollhagen. So Greta looked around for a place where she could go, and in the end she decided to go to Great Britain. And this is actually one of my favorite pieces because we see how experimental she was and her love of color. But we also see how she was adapting to her life in Britain. And instead of now being Margaretha Hyman Löwenstein, she was now Margaret Marx. From the beginning on, she wanted to fit in. She wanted to have a chance and a future for her child and for her family in Britain. However, the style did not catch on, and she was never able to sell her pottery. And she did have some success with her paintings, but that was the end of her ceramics career. Many of the German immigrants who were leaving in the 30s went to Palestine as a destination. This was a place where they could get visas. And in fact, for several potters who went there, they were Zionists themselves, and they wanted to go to Palestine, and they wanted to work with the earth, the land. And the land of Israel has a particular meaning in Judaism. And the reason is that this connection that the Jews had to the land goes right back to antiquity, right back to the biblical times. And here we see this motif of the biblical woman and the jug. And this is what somebody arriving in Palestine in the 1930s would see. They would actually see women walking around with these pots on their head, but they were not in fact Jews. They were the Arabs who were still living there and were still making the pots. And it became a very, very popular motif in Jewish popular culture in Israel. And we even see here, this is before the State of Israel was established, that women are dancing the water dance, and they're carrying these pots on their heads with a reference to antiquity and to the ancient times. What we have here now on the table is the work of Eva Samuel. The first work that she got was in Jerusalem in a very small pottery. And she started making these little figures of the people that she saw around her every day. And for a woman coming from Essen, suddenly finding herself in Palestine in 1932, everything was extremely exotic. But what's very interesting about the pieces that she made was she continued to work in the tradition that she had from Germany. But it didn't quite work in Palestine. They didn't have glazes there. So she imported them from Germany, but they were phenomenally expensive. So you see she works with a very, very reduced palette. She didn't necessarily achieve the goals that she wanted in terms of the coloration of the glazes. But what she did achieve, and this is what we see very clearly, is the gesture in her objects. And I think that is because she was such a painter. And here we have a picture of her together with her business partner. So with this teapot, I think we can show the European influence on ceramics in Palestine. When I saw it, the colors are so typical of German pots from the 1920s onwards, this particular combination of this green and this red. And also the style, we look at it and we think, oh yes, that's Art Deco, that must be the 1920s. But in fact, we're looking at the late 1930s. So I tried to find some kind of comparison piece to this. And this, we know, was made in Germany. In fact, in 1935 by the firm of Carstens. And here we see the form to a certain degree, we see the colors, we see the use of the wicker handle, we see this type of lid and the angle of the top. And it's so very, very clear that what they were doing at that time was copying European patterns. And this is one photograph that I found from 1939, and it shows the Kadar factory. And we see again a European woman hard at work painting the ceramics and organizing them. And when I looked at this photograph, and I managed to blow it up, and I found here, up on the top shelf, is indeed our teapot. It is our teapot. It also has the creamer and the rest of the service. So this is just a little bit later than this teapot, but we definitely see the influence from Europe.